She expected to find a past life when she closed her eyes and let the therapist guide her backward through time. A medieval village maybe, or an ancient civilization, something grounded in Earth's history. But when her awareness finally settled into a memory, she wasn't on Earth at all. She was in a vast hall filled with souls who glowed like living light, and they were all students. Students in a school that existed between lifetimes, in a space outside of time, where souls went to learn and prepare before she had trained there. They all had, and what she learned in that school was about to explain everything about her current life. Her name was Lauren, and she had come to regression therapy because nothing in her life made sense anymore. She was 38 years old, successful by most standards, but recently, everything had started falling apart. Her marriage was crumbling. Her career that had once excited her now felt empty. Her friendships felt superficial. She was having what everyone kept calling a midlife crisis, but it felt deeper than that. It felt like her entire life had been built on a foundation that was now crumbling, and she didn't know why or what to do about it. A friend suggested past life regression, saying it might help Lauren understand patterns she was repeating, or wounds she was carrying from previous incarnations. Lauren wasn't sure she believed in past lives, but she was desperate for answers, willing to try anything that might provide clarity about why her life felt so wrong. So she found a therapist named Dr. Raymond who specialized in regression work and who came highly recommended by people in her friend's spiritual community. Dr. Raymond's office was warm and comfortable, filled with books about consciousness and spirituality, with soft lighting that made Lauren feel safe and relaxed. They spent their first session just talking. Lauren described her sense of everything falling apart, her feeling that her life wasn't aligned with who she truly was, her growing conviction that she was supposed to be doing something completely different but having no idea what that something might be. Dr. Raymond listened thoughtfully and said something that surprised Lauren. He said that what she was describing sounded less like a midlife crisis and more like a life review process. He explained that sometimes souls would reach a point in their incarnation where they needed to step back and assess whether they were fulfilling the purpose they had agreed to before incarnating. This usually happened in the mid to late 30s, what he called the midpoint assessment. The soul would essentially review the life so far, recognize that it had gotten off track from its intended purpose, and create circumstances that forced the person to make changes. Lauren found this explanation oddly resonating. It felt more accurate than the simple midlife crisis narrative everyone else had been offering. Dr. Raymond suggested they do a regression, but not necessarily to a past life. He said that sometimes the most valuable insights came from accessing the space between lives, the realm where souls existed before choosing to incarnate. That's where life purposes were decided, where challenges and lessons were chosen, where the blueprint for each lifetime was created. If Lauren could access her own pre-birth planning, she might understand what she had agreed to do in this life and why she felt so disconnected from that purpose. They scheduled a full session for the following week. Lauren spent the intervening days thinking about what Dr. Raymond had said about the idea that she had chosen her life. Circumstances before being born, that there was a purpose she had agreed to fulfill but had somehow lost sight of. The concept was simultaneously comforting and challenging. Comforting because it suggested her life had meaning she just hadn't recognized yet. Challenging because it meant the mess she was in was somehow her own soul's doing, part of a larger plan she had forgotten. The day of the session arrived. Dr. Raymond explained the process again, how he would guide Lauren into a deep trance state where her conscious mind could step aside and allow her subconscious or superconscious to access memories from before birth. He emphasized that she would be safe, would maintain awareness, could return to normal consciousness at any time. Then, they began. Dr. Raymond's voice was steady and calming as he guided Lauren to close her eyes, to focus on her breathing, to allow her body to relax completely. He used progressive relaxation, having Lauren release tension from every muscle group, feeling herself sink deeper and deeper into the comfortable recliner. Her breathing slowed, her thoughts quieted, and she felt herself shifting into an altered state where time became fluid and boundaries between self and not self became permeable. Dr. Raymond counted her backward, but instead of counting down through years of her current life, he counted backward through consciousness itself, moving through layers of awareness, through the moment of birth, through the time in the womb, and then beyond, into the space before incarnation. Lauren felt herself moving through darkness that was peaceful rather than frightening, and then gradually light began to appear, soft and golden, surrounding her like a warm embrace. When Dr. Raymond asked her to notice where she was, Lauren found herself in a space that was both vast and intimate. She was no longer in a body. She was pure consciousness, awareness without physical form, and she was in what could only be described as a classroom. Though unlike any classroom on Earth, the space was filled with other beings of consciousness, each one glowing with their own unique light and color. And at the front of this space, radiating a presence of profound wisdom and love, was a teacher. Dr. Raymond asked Lauren to describe what she was experiencing. She struggled to find words for something that transcended physical reality. She explained she was in a soul school, a place where souls went between incarnations to learn and prepare for their next life on Earth. The teacher was a very old soul, what some might call an ascended master or guide, someone who had completed their own cycle of incarnations and now helped others prepare for theirs. Lauren understood that she had been in this classroom many times before, preparing for various incarnations, but this particular memory was from her most recent visit to the soul school, when she had been preparing to incarnate as Lauren, to live the life she was currently living. The teacher was showing the gathered souls what they needed to learn, what challenges they would face, what purposes they could choose to fulfill in their upcoming lives. Dr. Raymond asked what the teacher was teaching. Lauren felt information flowing into her awareness, not as words, but as direct knowing. The teacher was explaining that Earth was a particularly challenging school for souls, a place where consciousness could accelerate its growth through direct experience of limitation, separation, and density. Souls chose to incarnate on Earth specifically because of these challenges, because nothing taught compassion like experiencing suffering, nothing taught unity like experiencing separation, nothing taught power like experiencing powerlessness. The teacher showed the souls various life templates, different scenarios they could choose for their next incarnation. Some templates focused on learning about relationships, experiencing love and loss and betrayal and forgiveness. Some focused on power and responsibility, learning about leadership or service or how to use influence wisely. Some focused on creative expression, learning to channel divine inspiration into physical form. Each template offered different lessons, different challenges, different opportunities for growth. Lauren watched as the other souls in the classroom considered their options, asking the teacher questions, discussing with each other what they wanted to learn next. She saw her own soul doing the same thing, examining the available templates, feeling which one resonated most strongly, which lessons she was ready to take on. And then she saw herself choosing the life that would eventually become her current incarnation as Lauren. Dr. Raymond asked her to describe what template she had chosen, what lessons her soul had agreed to learn. Lauren felt the memory becoming clearer, the choice her soul had made coming into focus. She had chosen a template focused on authenticity and self-expression. Her soul wanted to learn about living truthfully, about expressing her real self despite social pressure to conform, about finding her unique voice and using it to help others do the same. But the template included specific challenges designed to teach these lessons. She would be born into a family that valued success and conformity over individuality. She would grow up receiving messages that she needed to be practical, sensible, successful in conventional ways. She would feel pressure to pursue careers and relationships that looked good from the outside but didn't resonate with her inner truth. And all of this pressure would create a crisis point, usually in the mid to late 30s, where she would have to choose between continuing to live for others or finally starting to live for herself. Lauren saw the whole design of her life laid out like a map. The parents she had chosen specifically because they would pressure her in these ways. The marriage to a man who loved the version of herself she presented to the world but didn't really know who she was underneath. The career that paid well and impressed people but used none of her actual gifts. All of it had been deliberately chosen to create the exact crisis she was experiencing now, because the crisis was the teaching moment. The crisis was when she would finally have to decide who she really was and what she really wanted. Dr. Raymond asked if she had known how difficult this would be when she chose it. Lauren felt her soul's response, which was yes, absolutely. She had known it would be hard. The teacher had made that very clear. But her soul had also known that this particular challenge was exactly what she needed for her next stage of growth. She had mastered other lessons in previous incarnations. She had learned about compassion and service, had developed emotional intelligence, had gained wisdom about human nature. Now it was time to learn about authentic self-expression. and the only way to learn that was to incarnate into circumstances that made authenticity extremely difficult. Dr. Raymond asked what happened after she chose her life template. Lauren saw herself going through additional preparation. The teacher introduced her to other souls who would play significant roles in her life. She met the soul who would become her mother, who agreed to play the role of the critical parent who never seemed satisfied with Lauren's choices. She met the soul who would become her husband, who agreed to play the role of the partner who loved an idea of her rather than the reality of her. She met souls who would become her friends, her colleagues, her teachers, each one agreeing to play a specific part in helping her learn her chosen lessons. These were soul contracts, agreements made before incarnating about the roles each soul would play in the other's lives, and Lauren understood something profound as she watched these agreements being made. None of the people who had hurt her or disappointed her in her current life were villains. They were souls who loved her enough to agree to play difficult roles in her learning. Her critical mother was actually a dear friend on the soul level, someone who had agreed to provide the exact type of pressure that would eventually push Lauren toward authenticity. Her husband, who seemed to never really see her, was a soulmate in the truest sense, someone who agreed to mirror back her own tendency to hide herself. Dr. Raymond asked if she saw herself being born, entering the body of baby Lauren. She did. She watched as her soul, full of knowledge about its purpose and plan, moved closer and closer to Earth, to the moment of incarnation. And as she approached, she felt the veil of forgetting descending. The teacher had explained this would happen. She couldn't incarnate with full memory of her soul's purpose because that would defeat the point. The lessons could only be learned if they felt real, if she genuinely forgot what she was doing and why, if she had to find her way back to truth through her own efforts. So she was born with no conscious memory of the soul school, the life template, the contracts she had made. She was born as a blank slate, ready to be shaped by her environment, to forget herself completely so that later she could remember herself in a way that was earned rather than given. And Lauren watched as baby her grew into child her, absorbed all the messages about who she should be, built a personality around pleasing others and meeting expectations, lost connection with who she really was beneath all the conditioning. She watched herself make choices throughout her life that seemed right at the time, but that took her further and further from her soul's purpose. Choosing a practical major in college instead of the art she loved, marrying a man who fit the picture of what her life should look like rather than someone who truly knew her, building a career that impressed others but bored her. With each choice, she moved further from authenticity, built thicker walls around her true self, forgot more completely what she had come here to do. And then she watched as the crisis began. Around age 35, right on schedule according to her life template, things started feeling wrong. The marriage started showing cracks. The career started feeling empty. The life she had built started feeling like a prison. This was the turning point the soul school had prepared her for. This was the moment when she would have to choose between continuing to live inauthentically or finally breaking free and discovering her real self. Dr. Raymond asked what her soul wanted her to know about this crisis. Lauren felt information flowing from her higher self, from the part of her that remembered the plan even when her conscious mind had forgotten. The message was clear and compassionate. The crisis was not a mistake, it was the whole point. Everything had been leading to this moment of choice. And while it was actually the beginning of something beautiful, her true life was about to start. But only if she had the courage to let the false life die. The teacher from the soul school appeared in Lauren's awareness, offering additional guidance. The teacher explained that this was a critical juncture for Lauren's soul growth. She could choose to repair and continue with her current life, could patch up her marriage and recommit to her career, and keep living for others' approval. Many souls made that choice, staying in their comfortable prison, rather than risking the unknown of authentic living. But if she made that choice, the lesson wouldn't be learned, the purpose wouldn't be fulfilled, and her soul would carry this unfinished business into the next incarnation, having to learn it all over again in an even more challenging context. Or she could choose the path her soul had intended all along. She could honor the crisis as the teaching moment it was meant to be. She could be honest about who she really was and what she really wanted. She could risk disappointing people, risk being judged, risk losing the life she had built, in order to finally start building a life that was actually hers. This was the harder choice in the short term, but the right choice for her soul's evolution. Dr. Raymond asked if the teacher showed her what would happen if she chose the authentic path. Lauren saw glimpses of possible futures, She saw herself leaving her marriage, not with anger but with compassion for both herself and her husband, acknowledging that they had grown in different directions and it was time to let each other go. She saw herself leaving her corporate job, taking the risk of pursuing work that actually used her creative gifts, even though it meant less money and security. She saw herself losing some friends who preferred the old version of her, but gaining new friendships with people who actually knew and loved her real self. She saw herself going through a difficult transition period, what spiritual teachers sometimes called the dark night of the soul, where the old identity had died but the new one hadn't fully emerged yet. She saw herself feeling lost and alone and questioning whether she had made a terrible mistake. But she also saw herself emerging from that dark period transformed, more alive than she had ever been, finally inhabiting her own skin, finally expressing her unique gifts, finally living the life her soul had intended. And she saw the ripple effects of her choice. She saw other people inspired by her courage to live authentically, making their own choices to honor their truth. She saw her future work helping others through their own awakening processes, using her experience of the difficult transition to guide them through theirs. She saw that by fulfilling her own purpose, she would help others fulfill theirs, creating a ripple of authenticity and awakening that extended far beyond her individual life. Dr. Raymond guided Lauren to ask if there were other souls from her soul school classroom who were incarnating in her time period with similar purposes. Lauren saw that yes, there were many. The classroom she had been in contained dozens of souls, all preparing to incarnate into the same general time period on Earth, all choosing life templates focused on authenticity and awakening. They were a wave of souls who had agreed to incarnate during this critical time in human history when consciousness was shifting, when the old ways of living based on external approval and rigid roles were crumbling, when humanity was learning to value authenticity and individual expression over conformity. She saw that these souls would find each other, would recognize each other, would support each other through the difficult transitions. Some of them were already in her life. That one friend who had suggested regression therapy was a soul from her classroom. A colleague at work who also seemed to be questioning everything was a soul from her classroom. Random people she had meaningful conversations with at coffee shops or bookstores, souls she felt instant connection with. Many of them were from her classroom, all of them going through similar processes of awakening to their true purpose. The teacher explained that soul groups often incarnated together, supporting each other through the challenges they had chosen. Lauren wasn't alone in this crisis and transition. She had a whole soul family scattered across the planet, all of them waking up around the same time, all of them learning similar lessons about authenticity and self-expression, all of them contributing to the larger shift in human consciousness that was underway. Dr. Raymond asked if there were specific skills or knowledge Lauren had learned in the soul school that would help her in her current life. The teacher showed her that yes, she had received extensive training before incarnating. She had learned about energy work, about how to sense and shift the invisible forces that influenced physical reality. She had learned about intuition, about how to access wisdom beyond the thinking mind. She had learned about manifestation, about how thoughts and beliefs shaped experience. She had learned about healing, both for herself and for others. All of this knowledge was stored in her soul, available to her if she knew how to access it. It was like having a library of wisdom built into her consciousness, but she had to remember it existed and learn how to check out the books. The crisis she was going through was actually helping with this because, as her old identity crumbled, she became more open to aspects of herself she had suppressed or forgotten. The spiritual abilities and knowledge she had learned in the soul school were beginning to come online, breaking through into her conscious awareness. Dr. Raymond asked if the teacher had any final guidance for Lauren. The teacher moved closer in Lauren's awareness, and she felt surrounded by immense love and compassion. The teacher's message was simple but profound. Trust the process. Trust that everything happening was exactly what her soul had chosen and needed. The crisis was not a mistake or a failure. It was the curriculum. It was her soul school education manifesting in physical form. And just as she had trusted the teacher in the space between lives, she could trust her inner teacher now, the part of her that remembered the plan even when her conscious mind couldn't see it. The teacher also reminded Lauren that she had graduated from the soul school. She had completed her preparation. She was ready for this challenge, equipped with everything she needed to navigate it successfully. The difficulty she was experiencing wasn't evidence that she was failing, but evidence that she was growing, stretching beyond her old limitations, becoming more of who she truly was. Growth was supposed to feel uncomfortable. That's how you knew it was working. Dr. Raymond began to bring Lauren back to present consciousness, counting her up slowly, grounding her in her current body and current time. When Lauren opened her eyes, she was crying but also smiling. Everything made sense now. The crisis wasn't random or meaningless. It was exactly what she had signed up for in the soul school. It was her final exam, her opportunity to demonstrate that she had learned her lessons about authenticity and self-expression. And knowing this transformed how she felt about her situation. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances, she felt like a student taking an important test that she had prepared for extensively. Instead of feeling confused about what to do, she felt clarity about the choice her soul wanted her to make. Instead of feeling alone in her struggle, she felt connected to an entire soul family going through similar processes. The regression had given her context, meaning, and direction. In the weeks and months that followed, Lauren made the difficult choices her soul had been calling her to make. She left her marriage with love and gratitude for what they had shared, but honesty about their incompatibility. She left her corporate job and started exploring work that used her actual gifts, even though it meant financial uncertainty. She started being honest with people about who she really was instead of maintaining the polished facade she had built over decades. And yes, it was hard. Yes, there were moments of doubt and fear and grief for the life she was leaving behind, but there were also moments of profound rightness, a feeling like she was finally living in alignment with her soul's purpose. She started connecting with others from her soul group, people who had also been in that classroom preparing to incarnate during this time of collective awakening. They supported each other, shared resources and encouragement, reminded each other of their soul school training when things got difficult. They formed a community of conscious support that made the individual journeys much less lonely. Lauren also began to access the skills she had learned in the soul school. Her intuition became stronger and more reliable. She found she could sense energy in rooms and people, could help others release stuck emotions, could guide people through their own awakening processes. She started offering intuitive counseling, using the wisdom she had gained in the soul school, combined with her direct experience of navigating crisis and transformation. Her work began to feel like service rather than just a job, like she was finally using her gifts in the way her soul had intended. She thought often about the soul school, about the classroom full of glowing souls preparing for their earth adventures, and she understood that this wasn't just about past life regression or remembering what happened before birth. It was about recognizing that her current life was the manifestation of choices her soul had made, of lessons her soul wanted to learn, of a curriculum designed specifically for her growth. Every challenge, every relationship, every crisis was part of the coursework, and she was both the student and, in her own way, the teacher, learning lessons that she would eventually help others learn. Years later, when people asked Lauren how she had found the courage to completely transform her life, to leave everything familiar and start over in her late 30s, she would tell them about the soul school. She would explain that she hadn't actually found courage, she had remembered it. She had remembered that she was a soul who had trained for exactly this challenge, who had prepared extensively, who had chosen this difficult curriculum because it was exactly what she needed for her growth, and remembering that changed everything. She also encouraged others to consider that their own lives might be unfolding according to plans made in the soul school, that their challenges might be exactly what they chose to learn from, that they too had trained for their circumstances, even if they couldn't remember the training. This perspective transformed how people related to their difficulties. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they could ask, "What am I meant to learn from this?" Instead of feeling victimized by life, they could feel curious about the curriculum. And Lauren maintained her connection to the teacher from the soul school through meditation and conscious dreaming. Whenever she felt lost or overwhelmed, she would go back in her awareness to that classroom full of glowing souls, would reconnect with the teacher's loving presence, would remember her soul school education. The teacher was always there, always available, always offering the wisdom and perspective she needed, because the teacher wasn't just a memory from before birth. The teacher was an aspect of her own higher self, the part that never forgot the purpose and plan, that guided her from within, even when her conscious mind couldn't see the way forward. Looking back on the regression session that revealed the soul school, Lauren saw it as the turning point of her life. It was the moment she stopped being a passive participant in her life and became a conscious co-creator with her soul. It was the moment she remembered that she had chosen this challenging curriculum because she was strong enough to handle it, wise enough to learn from it, brave enough to grow through it. And it was the moment she understood that she wasn't alone, that she was part of a vast community of souls who had trained together in the space between lives and were now supporting each other as they fulfilled their purposes on Earth. Subscribe to remember the training your soul completed before choosing this life.